What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Saturday, March 4th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, let's take a look at this 5-game NBA slate. So at the point guard position, James Harden looking good here from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Milwaukee Bucks, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing point guards. But James Harden has averaged 49.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 37 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. Now, he's projected at 44.4 fantasy points here tonight, and that's because of the bad matchup. But like you'll see in a second, he's got a good player versus team history versus the Bucks. So I think he can score 50 fantasy points or more here and get you over 5 times value. He's 9,700 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. So under 10K, I think it's a good price tag for James Harden, who's playing really well, and he's playing a ton of minutes. So Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game, and James Harden has scored 53, 42, and 51 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 38, 36, and 39 minutes. So, like I said, I don't like to just pick studs, or I don't like to pick studs too often in these videos, because it's like obviously James Harden, but I think some people are going to get thrown off by this bad matchup. But in reality, take a look at this. In the last 5 games versus the Milwaukee Bucks, James Harden has scored 60, 55, and 38 fantasy points. So 2 out of those 3 games would have been way over 5 times value. So I think he's got some monster upside here, limited downside. The nice thing about the Bucks, they're going to keep the game close and competitive. James Harden likely will be able to play the 4 quarters of this game, and that's why I think this is an attractive price tag for one of these studs that does have a bad matchup, but I think it's going to do well tonight. So I like James Harden here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, now if you want to come down in salary here at the point guard position, actually let me just give them to you as a shooting guard. So moving on, or at the shooting guard position, we have Caris LeVert. So this is a value play, and the last 2 games are super encouraging, and it does look like Caris LeVert is going to continue to play and play pretty heavy minutes. So Caris LeVert from the Cleveland Cavaliers playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the 4th worst defense overall, give up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Caris LeVert has averaged 24.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 19% usage rate. He is projected at 24.3 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 6.2 times value, or 6.2 times value, and that's if he scores his season average. So Caris LeVert, only 3,900 DraftKings salary. Now he is 1,500 more on FanDuel, so FanDuel has him priced up, but I love that DraftKings price. So Vegas thinks there's going to be 220.5 points scored in this game, and Caris LeVert has scored 22, 22, and 1 fantasy point in the last 3 games, playing 33, 22, and 9 minutes. So it's those last 2 games where he played 22 and then 33 minutes last game, scoring 22 fantasy points in each of those games. And 22 fantasy points would be over 5 times value. So I like Caris LeVert who has scored 32 and 31 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Pistons. So I like Caris LeVert here versus the Detroit Pistons. Okay, another shooting guard, another value play here, just a couple $100 more on DraftKings, and much more reasonably priced on FanDuel if you're looking for a shooting guard value play on FanDuel, because Caris LeVert is priced up over there. Take a look at Victor Oladipo from the Miami Heat playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have the 6th worst defense overall, middle of the pack defending opposing shooting guards. Victor Oladipo has averaged 22.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 27 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He's projected at 20.5 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5 times value. He's $4,100 DraftKings salary, only $400 more on FanDuel, so I like that price on both sites. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 225.5 points scored in this game. Victor Oladipo has scored 12, 18, and 21 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 25, 21, and 19 minutes. So he is on a back-to-back. It's a pretty good matchup. I think that this is worth the risk here, although when you look at his last 3 games and you see that he's on a back-to-back, it doesn't leave you with a confident feeling. But he is out there playing 20 to 25 minutes, and he's averaging 0.87 fantasy points per minute. And we know if he gets hot, he can put up some big numbers. So I think he's got a pretty big ceiling for a low price tag. Of course, there's the risk there. He's on a back-to-back. How many minutes is he going to play? Is he going to be productive? But I like my chances here in this matchup. I think it's a good spot for him. So I like Victor Oladipo here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, everyone, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is Levy Arnold. Levy Arnold, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And then we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, another shooting guard, a value play. There's a lot of good 4K salary value plays at the shooting guard position here on DraftKings. So I like DeAnthony Melton from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Milwaukee Bucks, who have a good defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing shooting guards. And DeAnthony Melton has averaged 24.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. So he's projected at 25 fantasy points here tonight, which seems totally reasonable if he's going to play 30 minutes or more, which it looks like he's going to. And that's 6.3 times value. So he's $4,000 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. DeAnthony Melton has scored 41, 21, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 32, and 30 minutes. So he put up that 41 fantasy point game last game, and he's averaging, around 25 fantasy points per game on the season. And if he gets 25 fantasy points here tonight, that's 6.3 times value. So it seems like he's got a pretty good chance of hitting that. Now, he scored 26, 14, 39, and 12 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Bucks. And And I think that's exactly what we're going to get with this play, is a 50-50 dice roll here on either a good game or a bad game. I think he's either going to crush value here, get you 6, 7, 8 times value, or he's going to have a flop game and go out there and score 12, 15 fantasy points and pull your lineup down just a little bit. But I think he's worth it because he's a low salary play here. So I like the upside for the low salary. The risk to reward makes sense on these guys. So I like DeAnthony Melton here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. Okay, so a couple of mid-range plays here. I like Kenyon Martin from the Houston Rockets playing the San Antonio Spurs, who have the absolute worst defense overall, give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Kenyon Martin has averaged 23 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 27 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. So he's projected at 23.1 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 27 fantasy points or more in this matchup. So I'm just going to update his projection to 27 fantasy points. And I'm going to take a look here and see that will be 4.7 times value. So it looks like he's going to need 30 fantasy points or more here. So he's got a good matchup here, and that's why I like him. But if you're looking at this, if taking a step back from this pick, looking at his season average and his season averages, I might want to pass on Kenyon Martin, but let me just give you this play anyways. You guys can decide for yourself, because he certainly has 30 plus fantasy point upside. He's playing a lot of minutes recently, and he has a fantastic matchup. So Kenyon Martin, he is 5,800 DraftKings salary, 100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 230.5 points scored in this game. Now, Kenyon Martin has scored 27, 26, and 31 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 26, and 32 minutes. So he's playing pretty decent minutes here. The 32 and 34 minute games, if you can get Kenyon Martin for 32 minutes or more at 5,800 DraftKings salary and 5,900 on FanDuel, I think that's and he's got a great matchup here. And he's got decent history here versus the Spurs. 3 of those 20-point games, a 15 and a 12. But look at his last 4. 27, 26, 31, and 41. So they are running Kenyon Martin. And Kenyon Martin is getting some fantasy production in. He's getting the work in. He's got a good matchup. So I like Kenyon Martin if you are looking for like that last play in your lineup and you're right around this price tag. I think he's got 30 plus fantasy point upside. So I like Kenyon Martin here versus the San Antonio Spurs. Sorry, it took a while to get it. I kept trying to decide, should I play him? Should I not? Did I make a mistake with this pick here? So let's move on to Kyle Anderson. So Kyle Anderson from the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the Sacramento Kings, who have the 10th worst defense overall, give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Kyle Anderson has averaged 24.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 14% usage rate. Now he's projected at 24.4 fantasy points here tonight, but let's go with 27 fantasy points, just like Kenyon Martin. But at his price tag, that would be 4.8 times value. So he's 5,600 DraftKings salary, 400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 238 points scored in this game, so a high-scoring game. And Kyle Anderson has scored 21, 34, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 25, and 30 minutes. So he's got pretty good upside here, 30 plus fantasy point upside. If he scores 28, 29, 30, he's going to just about hit 5 times value. He is on a back-to-back. Let's just take a look at his previous back-to-backs So we click on Kyle Anderson, we go to the scoring logs tab, and now we're looking here at the dates on the left side, and we're just looking for a back-to-back game. Oh, so 7th and 8th, he actually didn't play either of those games, so that was we can't use that one. Okay, the 27th and the 28th, he played 27 and then 26 minutes. So it looks like on the back-to-back on both of them, he did play reduced minutes there. Let's see this other one, 13 to 14, he played 31 and 28 minutes. And then we have this one, 30 to 31, he played 23 and 34 minutes. So it looks like one of those he was rested. Let me just take a look at something. So Kyle Anderson played 35 minutes yesterday. So I think we could expect, if his season average is only 26 minutes, and I think we can expect 26 to 30 minutes from Kyle Anderson, even on a back-to-back. So don't love the back-to-back tag right there, but it's a great matchup, high-scoring game, and he certainly can get you 30 fantasy points or more and get you over 5 times value. So I like Kyle Anderson here versus the Sacramento Kings. Okay, and the other guy, it's like this guy, I said to myself, I'm not going to pick him again in these videos. I'm not going to play him again. He's burnt me so many times throughout the season. Almost every time I play the guy, he burns me. But then he can put up 30 to 40 fantasy points and crush value, and you just feel like, okay, he can do that any night. So you know what? I'm going to pass him just because he has been so hit or miss recently, but I will mention him. So Tobias Harris from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks got a good defense, but Tobias Harris, he's averaging 29.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 19% usage rate. And he's projected at 28.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's been the case for the past month. His projection, because based on the season average, has been fantastic. So projected at 5.3 times value. He's always stuck out because it looks like it's a good value play. So he's 5,300 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Tobias Harris has scored 20, 38, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he played exactly 34 minutes in every single one of those games. He's averaging 34 minutes per game on the season, so it's like this guy is solidified for those 34 minutes at least, and you just would expect him to give you good production. Look, he's averaging 0.9 fantasy points per minute. Like, on paper, you're playing this guy every night at 5,300 DraftKings salary, projected at 28.3 fantasy points and 5.3 times value. That's under his season average. Going to be playing 34 minutes or more, most likely. So, I'm just going to say, play with caution. Oh, this is why I mentioned him. This is why I marked him, even though I didn't want to talk about him, is versus the Bucks, the last 3 games, Tobias Harris has scored 31, 53, and 35 fantasy points. So he has absolutely fantastic player versus team history here. So it's probably like, if you're going to roll the dice with Tobias Harris, I guess this would be the game to do it, because he's got good player team history versus the Bucks here. And when you look at his last 5 games, outside that 11 and that 20, it's a 24, a 32, and a 38 for Tobias Harris. So I feel like he might be pulling it together a little bit. So I like Tobias Harris here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, another guy that I've been on quite a bit. He's on a back-to-back, but that won't matter. He'll play a ton of minutes still. And his price tag is still low, and he's been producing. And so I'm going to continue to roll with Harrison Barnes from the Sacramento Kings, playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 11th worst defense overall, middle of the pack defending opposing power forwards. We on power forwards, still on small forwards. He's also eligible at power forward position, but defending opposing small forwards. Harrison Barnes has averaged 25.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He's projected at 26.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.5 times value. So he's only 4,800 DraftKings salary. He is 1,000 more on FanDuel, but I think that price is fine on both sites. I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 238 points scored in this game, and Harrison Barnes has scored 28, 48, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 36, 37, and 32 minutes. So I like Harrison Barnes here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. And let me just check. Harrison Barnes scored 20, 20, 46, 36, and 26 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Timberwolves. So Harrison Barnes has been hot. He'll play plenty of minutes. His price tag is still low, especially on DraftKings. So I like Harrison Barnes here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, let's move on to the power forward position here. So at the power forward position, I like Jeremy Sochan from the San Antonio Spurs, playing the Houston Rockets, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Jeremy Sochan has averaged 22.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 19% usage rate. He's projected at 25.9 fantasy points here tonight. I think that projection is a little bit low. I think we can see 28 fantasy points or more here from Jeremy Sochan in a good matchup, which is over 5 times value. He's 5,400 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 230.5 points scored in this game. Jeremy Sochan has scored 48, 29, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 31, 27, and 32 minutes. He's also had monster usage rate. Last game, 35%, 22, and 29% usage rate in the last 3 games. So he's got a great matchup, a high-scoring game. Scored 25 fantasy points in his last game versus the Rockets, but now he's playing pretty heavy minutes here, close to 30 minutes a night the last 3 games, or averaging 30 minutes a night the last 3 games, putting up fantastic production. He's in a good matchup. His price tag still relatively low, so I like Jeremy Sochan here versus the Houston Rockets. Okay, a couple more power forwards to look at here. I'll just mention them briefly. They're in the low 4K range. You got Keegan Murray from the Sacramento Kings playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, so he's got a good matchup. He's only 4,500 DraftKings salary, projected at 24.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.5 times value. He's averaging 23.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game. And he scored 24, 37, and 39 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 36, and 31 minutes. So that actually looks like a really solid pick here. So it is a back-to-back, but it looks like his minutes are solidified at 30 minutes or more here. And he's putting up 0.79 fantasy points per minute, but he's been hot the last 3 games. Started heating up 4 games ago. He scored at 28, so he's been hot the last 4 games. So I like Keegan Murray here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the other player who's been playing well and is still low price tag with a high projection, still has a low DraftKings price. They priced him up on FanDuel, but I like Tari Eason from the Houston Rockets playing the San Antonio Spurs, who have the worst defense overall, give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Also eligible at the small forward position, Tari Eason has averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 20 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. But he's been playing more minutes recently, and he's projected at 26.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 6.1 times value on DraftKings because he's only $4,300 DraftKings salary, but he is priced up $1,600 more on FanDuel, so I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 230.5 points scored in this game, and Tari Eason has scored 29, 37, and 38 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 25, 31, and 28 minutes. So I like Tari Eason as a value play here versus the San Antonio Spurs. Okay, moving on to the center position. So studs, I like Joel Embiid. Then if you want to come down in salary here, like a mid-range play, mid to high tier, take a look at Evan Mobley from the Cleveland Cavaliers playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the 4th worst defense overall, give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing centers. Evan Mobley has averaged 34.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He's projected at 35.8 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 4.7 times value. So I do think he can score 40 fantasy points or more here and get you over 5 times value. He's $7,600 DraftKings salary. He's the same price on FanDuel, so I like that price on both sites. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 220.5 points scored in this game. Evan Mobley has scored 33, 39, and 23 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 39, 33, and 29 minutes. Now, I like this play because Evan Mobley has scored 32, 41, 40, 40, and 31 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Pistons. So, Evan Mobley, out of his last 5 games versus the Pistons, 3 out of those 5 would have been 5 times value or more. And then in his last 5 in general, it looks like 2 of those would have been 5 times value or more. So he has been struggling a little bit recently, but I think this is a good bounce back game for him. It's a good matchup, and not on a back-to-back. He could play 35 to 40 minutes this game, and he's averaging 1.03 fantasy points per minute. So good matchup, has a clear path to value. So I like Evan Mobley here versus the Detroit Pistons.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.